Looks like the players are waiting and ready for us.
Two handsome nerds.
Two very well-established Pro Tour stalwarts.
Yep.
Kyle Boggemes and Steve Rubin.
Yeah, Kyle's a top 8 and Steve has a win, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
All right, well, both players are just going to play a land and pass. Raging Ravine for Steve and a Scalding Tarn for Kyle. Steve does have a Blackleaf Cliffs and a Dark Confidant, so this is going to be a card that's going to force the action here for Kyle. He needs to have something like a Lightning Bolt or a Path to Exile to take care of it. Otherwise, the card advantage could just run away with the game.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that's interesting about the matchup, and one of the key points is Steve has a few permanents that can just run away with the game. A lot of Kyle's cards, they're going to have a card advantage component when they come into play, like Snapcaster Mage, Restoration Angel, Blade Splicer, Spell Queller. They have an effect when they come into play, but they don't have an effect that keeps triggering over and over and over again. Whereas Dark Confidant and Liliana of the Veil and any other Planeswalkers that Steve has access to, if he can resolve them and they aren't dealt with immediately, they will just keep giving Steve more and more and more of an advantage and can really run away with the game.
All right, well, Kyle is going to fall to 17 using his Scalding Tarn for a Steam Vent's going to use the Lightning Bolt on Steve's Dark Confidant. Players are just going to play draw go for a couple of turns. But Kyle looks like he's going to force some action. He's going to fall to 16 using his Flooded Strand. We might see something like a Serum Visions here.
Yeah, so one thing that's a little interesting to note about Kyle's deck is he has Serum Visions, but he does not have Ancestral Visions. So he really is focused on a bit more of a tempo plan. He has them in the sideboard.
Like he has 3
but
copies
none in the main.
3 in the sideboard. Going to definitely come in here against Jund.
Yeah. Still not seeing that in the main deck, though, means that he's going to lose a little bit of percentage points in game 1, but I kind of like it as a metagame called, you don't want to be drawing a bunch of extra cards when they're not necessarily the right cards for the matchup. And we have talked about how we're in kind of a rather open field right now. So I like how Kyle's focused a little bit more on a tempo plan and trying to kill his opponent.
Right, so it looks like Steve is going to fire off a Kolaghan's command here. He's going to target Kyle to make him discard a card and then return the Dark Confidant from his graveyard to his hand. And here's the negate.
Yeah.
Kyle just has 2 copies in his main deck.
It's pretty crazy when you think about it.
All right, Steve does find another copy of Dark Confidant that he's going to fire off and pass the turn back to Kyle.
And this is one of the things that the Jund deck can do. With some of its instant speed stuff, he was able to make Kyle use his mana on Kyle's turn so that Steve could untap with all of his mana open and play this Dark Confidant underneath counter magic.
Well, Kyle is just going to fire off a Lightning Helix that's going to take care of the Dark Confidant, put him back up to 19 health, but he's going to pass the turn back without a 4th land drop. Steve Rubin will draw a card, pass the turn back without a 4th land drop for himself.
And this is exactly where Kyle wants to be, being able to untap with an empty board, because he needs to line his answers up very specifically. He's got some, like Negate's a perfect example. It's a pretty specific answer.
Kyle does find a copy of Celestial Colonnade and pass the turn back. Here's a Liliana of the Veil for Steve Rubin. Let's see if Kyle is going to respond. He has access to cards like Spell Queller and Negate. Doesn't quite have enough mana for Cryptic Command yet.
Yeah, normally a card like Lightning Bolt is pretty bad in this matchup for the Jund deck, but because of the presence of Spell Queller, Lightning Bolt all of a sudden is a much more of a live draw than it usually is.
All right, Liliana of the Veil will resolve. Steve Rubin's going to plus it, so both players get to choose and discard a card. Something like Vendilion Click on Steve's end step could be a very good play here for Kyle if he happens to have one. And he does, so he's going to cast Vendilion Click. He's going to target himself. He's going to get rid of a Spell Snare and draw a card. And now Liliana of the Veil's ability is going to resolve. All right, Steve will discard an Anger of the Gods. Kyle's going to discard a Path to Exile.
And what Steve's probably most worried about now is this Liliana eating a Lightning Bolt. Steve would like to keep this on the board. if he puts both players into top deck mode, that favors the Jund player a lot more than the counter spell player.
Now that copy of Kolaghan's command that Steve used was his only copy, so he does not have any more Kolaghan's commands. Kyle's just going to attack Liliana down to 1 with the Vendean Click. He's going to fire off a Serum Visions. See what he does with his Scry. Both on top. Good cards. Does he have an answer or a way to remove that Liliana now?
Yeah, if he uses a Lightning Bolt, then essentially Liliana is just a 1-for-1. But if it's able to sit on the board and Steve is able to, you know, use his removal profitably by using it to protect his Liliana, then that's going to work out pretty well for Steve, and that's basically the game plan that he wants to play.
Kyle will just pass the turn back. Steve will draw for his turn and still doesn't have a 4th land. But he does have a bunch of ways to interact here, so let's see how he decides to navigate this turn. Normally Abrupt Decay is a pretty clean removal spell, but Spell Queller does exile the spell, so Spell Queller would be able to stop an Abrupt Decay here.
Yeah, because he has the Lightning Bolt and the Abrupt Decay, he shouldn't have too much to worry about here.
Well, Negate's going to take care of that Lightning Bolt. Steve will use an Abrupt Decay on the Vendean Click. Going to get a plus on the Liliana.
So this is a pretty minor point, but I would have liked to have seen Steve plus on the Liliana before going through that, because he knows he's going to be able to kill that Vendalion Click, but Kyle doesn't, and it may affect Kyle's discard decision.
All right, well, it looks like Steve is going to get rid of an Abrupt Decay. Kyle will pitch a Flooded Strand. Snapcaster is going to flash back a Lightning Helix. It's going to take Kyle up to 22 and get rid of that Liliana. Snapcaster is like the one card that will really allow Kyle to get back into this game, or be in the game if it turns into an attrition matchup against this Jund deck.
Yeah, and drawing another land for Steve is a pretty big deal. It means that he's going to be able to play this Scavenging Ooze and keep it out of Lightning Bolt range by bumping it up to 4 toughness if he chooses. And it's also just kind of a decent body in this situation. It can block the Snapcaster Mage. It can act as a hate card against future Snapcaster Mages.
Well, Scavenging Ooze is going to eat a Dark Confidant out of Steve's own graveyard. It will take him up to 18 and make his creature a 3/3. Path to Exile, though, is just going to be a clean answer. Steve is going to decide if he wants to eat a card out of Kyle's graveyard with his last remaining green mana.
And I suspect that he's going to just try to gain a life here, but if Kyle only had, let's say, 1 removal spell in his graveyard, I would, I like trimming those down. And it looks like he actually does go for a Lightning Bolt rather than a creature to gain a life.
So he does remove the Lightning Bolt.
And that's basically just Steve looking to cut off future Snapcaster Mage options.
Snapcaster is going to attack Steve down to 16, and a Blade Splicer is going to give him a Golem token, a 3/3. A little value there, extra body alongside it.
Yep. And Steve had been missing land drops, so that Path to Exile, getting him a land, has a silver lining, and now Raging Ravine is potentially online.
Steve picked up his 3rd copy of Dark Confidant. Looks like he's going to start off with a Maelstrom Pulse on the Golem, and then play that Dark Confidant. Pass the turn back to Kyle. He's going to take a draw. He's going to ship with both of his creatures. 2/1 Snapcaster Mage, 1/1 Blade Splicer. Play a Colonnade and pass.
So Steve is a little behind on life, but this Dark Confidant has the potential to just run away with the game. All of Kyle's ways to get card advantage are, like I said before, Snapcaster Mage comes into play, +1 a card. But Dark Confidant can just be, a 5 or 6 for 1. So.
Right, Steve has a Raging Ravine, and an attack with that Dark Confidant, but Spell Queller is going to jump in. No, Steve, it's not going to try and counter that Dark Confidant that's already on the battlefield. It will block. A 2-3 is going to eat the 2-1. Kyle does now have 5 power worth of attackers. Rage and Ravine will be activated before blocks. The Lightning Bolt is going to take care of it.
And everything is lining up perfectly for Kyle in this situation.
If he happens to find one more land, he can even start attacking with the Celestial Colonnade.
Yep.
Which is a 2-turn clock all on its own. Tarmogoyf is going to come down.
Yeah. Out of this Jeskai Flash deck, Celestial Colonnade is actually one of the better cards in my opinion.
All right, well, Path to Exile is going to take care of that Tarmogoyf. Kyle just has all the answers. His deck is full of 1-mana ways to interact. Steve is going to draw a Thoughtseize and scoop him up. Kyle Boggemes is going to take the first game here with Jeskai Flash over Jund. And it looked like just every turn for Steve felt a little awkward, and every turn for Kyle seemed to line up pretty well that game.
Yeah, things lined up really well for Kyle. He was able to, get rid of his spell snare when he didn't want it. He had the 2 negates, but was able to find good targets for them. He was able to use a lot of his mana on a lot of his turns, and even things like being able to have Spell Queller block a Dark Confidant rather than counter it almost works out better, because then you don't have the liability of that Spell Queller dying and that Dark Confidant being recast. So, that I still feel that this is a close matchup, but that specific game was kind of a blowout for Kyle. Everything just came up right for him.
All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look at the sideboard so we can see we can figure out where things go from here. So on Steve's side, we have 3 Blood Moon, 2 Anger of the Gods, 2 Ravenous Trap, 2 Rakdos Charm, a Grim Lavamancer, an Ancient Grudge, an Obstinate Baloth, 1 Knight of Soul's Betrayal, 1 Collective Brutality, and 1 Liliana the Last Hope. What would you do here?
So the cards that I like, basically I like taking out as much removal as I can without making it so that I'm too weak to just random permanents. So I actually like bringing in a card like Grim Lavamancer in a matchup like this, because you can proactively play it and shoot down some Snapcaster Mages. Knight of Soul's Betrayal is something that some people would bring in this situation just because it hoses the Snapcaster Mages, the Vendilion Clicks, and the Blade Splicers, but it also hoses Steve's Dark Confidants. So I don't think he would bring it in, although if he wants to do something crazy, he could. And then Collective Brutality, Liliana on the Last Hope. Card advantage, good disruption. I think those are going to come in for sure.
Now on Kyle's side, we have 3 Ancestral Vision, 2 Dispel, 2 Blade Splicer, 2 Runed Halo, 2 Izzet Staticaster, a Negate, a Spell Pierce, 1 Grafdigger's Cage, and 1 Rest in Peace. What do you think Kyle's going to do? So
Kyle, I think, is basically just going to be looking to bring in more card advantage. The 3 Ancestral Visions, 2 Blade Splicers are going to excel in this matchup. And then I think he could also consider the 1 Rest in Peace if he just wants to hose the Tarmogoyfs and the Scavenging Oozes. It also can do a little bit of work against Kolaghan's Command. We saw Steve get a Dark Confidant back. But if Kyle does bring in the Rest in Peace, he may want to trim his Snapcaster Mages, because Rest in Peace would hose them too.
I could definitely see that. So I think that as long as things can line up for Steve the way they lined up for Kyle, he could go ahead and pull this match back and try and push it into a third game. But as we see here, there are a lot of different options that you can have in sideboarding, and one of the best ways to learn how to sideboard properly with your deck is through practice. And you can get a lot of practice by having your local game store get involved with the SCG Game Night. Not only can you get practice, but you get some sweet swag. So you can see here, once they get back on our beautiful faces here, both Andrew and I have our Mole Warden pin on. You can get these every week in November. And then we have Fintuition coming up in December. It's a parody on the card Intuition that is in Tempest. And then we have Squeaky Cheeky Acorn Breaker, who is a chipmunk. It's not a squirrel. I want to be correct with that. And it's a play on Kiki Jiki Mare Breaker. So you can get these.
Apparently a goblin squirrel.
A goblin squirrel?
Well, it's still creature goblin.
Well, Kiki Jiki is a goblin. But you can get these every week in January for Squeaky Cheeky. Go to starcitygames.com/game night. Make sure you let your local game store know that you want to get involved with this, as it's a great way to get some practice in with your decks, can play whatever formats you guys would like to, but you also can get some sweet swag that you can only get through our game night program.
Yeah, and swag's where it's at. You gotta, make sure you've got some style points when you play at your local store and your next open, and having sweet tokens is the way to do it.
Absolutely. So it looks like Steve has kept his opening 7. He will be on the play. Kyle is going to multi-6, so let's see if he can find an acceptable hand of Magic cards with which to battle this game. All right, he's going to keep. His Scry is going to stay right on top. Raging Ravine for Steve and a pass. Let's see if Kyle has something like Serum Visions for turn 1 or just a land go.
Or maybe an Ancestral Visions.
Oh,
One of like a lot of times I'll have Raging Ravine in my opening hand, and I'll just try to fire off a discard spell on turn 1, even if it makes some of my future plays a little bit more clunky, because Thought Seizing a turn 1 Ancestral Vision is so sweet.
Right, well, Kyle does just have a tapped Steam Vents and a pass back. Steve is going to use his Verdant Catacombs and fall down to 19. Let's see if we get a Shockland or not. Ooh, there's Blood Moon.
Wow, he's got the Blood Moon. So they do shut off Celestial Colonnade, and the Jeskai Flash deck, it doesn't have that many basics. Steve is going to be getting targeted with some Path to Exiles. So this Blood Moon plan is pretty interesting. I think basically the idea is Steve is just looking to get a little ahead on the board, or get 1 or 2 appropriate basics into play, and then just slam a Blood Moon and hope that it basically locks Kyle out of the game.
Well, Steve is just going to get a Tarmogoyf. It's going to be a 1-2. Kyle will use a Lightning Bolt, which will make the Tarmogoyf a 2-3, and then it will die from the 3 points of damage that it has.
One of the rare times that you can bolt a Goyf.
Kyle's also going to use a Flooded Strand, fall to 19, get a basic island, so maybe he's a little ahead of the curve here on making sure that he has basic lands from the potential Blood Moon out of Steve Rubin. He's going to fire off his Serum Visions.
He may also just want to preserve his life total, which is a completely reasonable thing to do.
I mean, he is a Pro Tour top 8 competitor. He might just be on the next level. Both cards to the bottom on the Scry. Going to pass the turn back to Steve. He's going to draw his card very quickly. We'll start off with an Inquisition of Kozilek. That's going to reveal basic planes, Restoration Angel, Blade Splicer, Snapcaster Mage, Vendilion Click. That is a motley crew of creatures that like to attack.
Yeah, and all of which have a card advantage opponent to them also upon resolution. So depending on what Steve's hand is, he may, if Steve has something like a Dark Confidant in his hand, then he probably wants to take the Snapcaster Mage so this Dark Confidant doesn't die. That said, if Steve doesn't have a good way to kill the Blade Splicer and he doesn't have a threat immediately, he may want to take the Blade Splicer instead, because it's something that Kyle can just proactively play and then potentially blink with the Resto Angel.
So it looks like Blade Splicer is what he's going to take. Play Stomping Ground taps, pass the turn back to Kyle. He's going to play out the planes that Steve knew about in his hand.
And I don't think it would be crazy for Kyle to just slam Snapcaster Mage, Flashback Serum Visions. He doesn't really have, at least as far as we know, depending on his top deck, he doesn't have anything else to do with his mana this turn. And he knows that Steve basically knows that.
Yep, so Snapcaster, Serum Vision. He's going to draw a card and scry. Now he could have just waited and used his Vendilion Click and potentially saved that Snapcaster so that he could Snap Bolt a Scavenging Ooze or a Tarmogoyf, or a Dark Confidant. But I like just putting some pressure onto the battlefield, filtering some of his draws. Lightning Bolt is going to take care of that Snapcaster Mage.
And I think also Kyle kind of wanted a 4th land. That's the other reason why I liked the Serum Visions. Hitting her land drops is just pretty good.
Now Steve had, his hand was to Terminate and a Liliana of the Veil, but did not have a second black mana source until he picked up a Verdant Catacombs here. So he can just land this Liliana, but he will be trading a Terminate for one of Kyle's creatures that he has in his hand, which is, probably what he wants to do anyway.
Yeah, and notably, all of those creatures would have some sort of come into play effect. So in this way, Steve is able to trade his Terminate for Kyle's creature without having that come into play effect generate any value. So, and this is pretty great for Steve. Kyle could have chosen to play or hold up mana for the Vendilion Click, which would have been able to come down and potentially threaten this Liliana. But now that is not the case.
All right, Steve is going to fall to 18 using that Verdant Catacombs for a swamp. He's going to land his Liliana the Veil and the plus. Players are deciding what they want to discard. Steve, as we know, has 2 copies of Terminate, so that's what's going. Kyle will pitch a copy of Negate.
Man, he would have loved to have held his mana up for that, but you don't always know how things are going to line up.
Yeah. That, and it's possible that he picked up the Negate off of the Serum Vision.
Yep. So it'll be interesting to see what Kyle wants to do here. I believe he has some options for attacking this Liliana. The 4th land's going to be pretty important with that. But basically, Steve just wants to get each player into top deck mode.
All right, so Kyle has a Celestial Colonnade and is going to pass. He's going to fire off a Draw Step Vendilion Click. So Steve has drawn his card for his turn.
And Steve really wants to respond with some sort of instant here if he has the option to. The Terminate that we saw could be good, but we'll see if he also drew something else.
All right, so we'll get word on what stage this is in, so if Vendilion Click has actually resolved yet or not. All right, still on draw phase. All right, Kolgan's command is going to pick off the click and make Kyle discard a card, which is a Restoration Angel. Click ability will resolve. Reveal a Terminate for Steve.
And this is great for Steve Rubin. They are in top deck mode, but Steve has a Liliana at 5, and 1 more land he can activate his Raging Ravine.
Yeah. Kyle does pick up a copy of Serum Visions for his turn. Draws a card. Now he's deciding what he wants to do with the Scry.
And this is a really tough spot for Kyle. His deck doesn't have a card like Celestial Purge that we sometimes see in these kind of lists as a way to deal with Liliana. Really, his only way to deal with it is going to be some flash threats, which he does have, but a lot of them don't have particularly high power, so they can't kill Liliana quickly.
All right, well, he is just going to top-bottom his Scry. Steve is going to find a Scavenging Ooze. He'll play it and then plus his Liliana. Kyle's going to respond with a Lightning Bolt. See if he's deciding whether or not he wants to pick off the Scavenging Ooze or knock Liliana down to 3 loyalty.
And if he scryed, let's say, another Lightning Bolt to the top, then it seems like Steve probably is going to end up losing his Liliana. But because they're thinking about this,
All right,
so I wonder if there's another Lightning Bolt on top or maybe a Snapcaster Mage.
Oh, it'll be a Vision. Okay.
So I think the strategy here from Kyle is that the Lightning Bolt just buys him time so that Liliana can't ultimate before this Ancestral Visions comes off the stack. At least that's what Kyle's hoping.
All right, Steve is going to eat the Blade Spicer out of Kyle's graveyard, go up to 19, make his Scavenging Ooze a 3/3. I'll plus the Liliana. Going to eat some more creatures with that Scavenging Ooze.
And I like getting the Scavenging Ooze up to a 4/4, so it's out of bolt range, and then using the rest of your green mana to just exile all of Kyle's instants and sorceries from his graveyard to basically blank any top deck Snapcaster Mages.
So Steve will get rid of that Vendilion Click, go up to 20, attack for 4, knocking Kyle down to 15. Ancestral Vision is going to tick, but he might not be around for the 4 turns it takes to resolve the spell.
And actually, if there's no path to exile in Kyle's graveyard, it also wouldn't be a bad idea to just keep exiling more creatures to make the Scavenging Ooze bigger.
All right, so Steve is not going to use his Scavenging Ooze on Kyle's end step so that he has protection from a Snapcaster Mage. Picks up a Dark Confidant. Going to plus the Liliana. Ooh, a path to exile is what Kyle found. It's going to target Scavenging Ooze on Steve's side. Steve's going to fire off a couple activations of his ability. Let's see what he gets rid of.
So definitely like exiling the 2 Lightning Bolts out of Kyle's graveyard. And exiling the Serum Visions is also a good idea because that's something that Kyle could, if Kyle top decks a Snapcaster Mage, he could just fire it off. It'd be pretty good.
So the 2 bolts and the Serum Visions is gone. Path to Exile will resolve. Steve's going to go get a Forest, the last basic land out of his deck. Pass the turn back. Vision is going to fall down to 2, but this Liliana on 5 and Dark Confidant are poised to be pretty big threats. Ooh, and he found a Snapcaster Mage.
Wow.
Which will let him flash back, Path to Exile, get rid of the Dark Confidant. Steve doesn't have any more basics in his deck.
But this is a turn where Steve can potentially minus the Liliana, kill the Snapcaster, fire up Raging Ravine, and getting 1+1/+1 counter on Raging Ravine is particularly relevant because then it's outside of bolt range. So a lot of times with Raging Ravine, even if I have another play that available, I'll activate my Raging Ravine and attack with it when the coast is clear, just to basically have that in the bank.
It's also going to knock Kyle down to 11, which is pretty, it's dead to a couple more Raging Ravine swings.
Yeah, I mean, it'll attack for 4, knock him down to 11, and then attack for 5, and then 6, which adds up to 11 conveniently.
That's what we're doing. Liliana is going to -2, get rid of the Snapcaster Mage. Raging Ravine is going to attack. Steve will remember his trigger, take it up to a 4/4, knock Kyle down to 11. He does get to draw 3 cards next turn, though.
Yeah, and he will likely have a Celestial Colonnade able to attack if he chooses to do so.
Hitting that land is pretty big for Kyle. It would have been nice to have some play to the board with the creature or whatnot, but he was kind of stuck on mana, and having a lot of resources available the turn you get to draw 4 cards is pretty important.
Yeah.
Steve's going to plus his Liliana of the Veil, discard a Blackleaf Cliffs. Looks like we're going to fire up that Raging Ravine again.
And unfortunately, if Kyle, he can't really activate Celestial Colonnade to kill this Liliana on his turn, because then he'll just be dead from the crackback on the Raging Ravine, which is a play I'm sure he's keenly aware of.
Now we might run into a spot here where Kyle finds a Path to Exile and thinks that he's safe. Like he can attack with the Colonnade. It has Vigilance, so he can kill the Liliana and then still have mana available for Path to Exile. But Steve is just sitting on this Inquisition of Kozilek that he's had for the last turn or so.
Yeah.
And he can just lead off with the Inquisition before he attacks. And so Kyle just might walk into that if he's not thinking about a discard spell.
Yeah, it is a good play though, and I would certainly take it if I could. I mean, the Liliana left on the board will undo all the benefit that Ancestral Visions has given to Kyle. So Liliana is such a good threat and is one of the main reasons that you always want to have 4s, because against these controlling decks, it's just so good.
All right, so looks like Kyle is going to draw his 4 cards. He'll play a Mountain and pass. And here's that Inquisition.
This is some good sequencing.
All right, Lightning Helix. He's going to knock Liliana down to 1 and put Kyle up to 8. Oh, so he drew 3 lands.
Ugh.
And a Lightning Helix.
Not a good Ancestral Visions. Basically, just drew him 1 card.
Well, he's also not going to draw those lands for his draw step now, which definitely helps. Steve knows that the coast is clear for his Raging Ravine.
This, if Steve doesn't have Lightning Bolt in his deck, I actually like activating the other Raging Ravine that doesn't have any counters on it, because that would mean you could have either Raging Ravine get pathed and still have one that doesn't die to Lightning Bolt. And having Kyle at, 4 life or 2 life doesn't really make much of a difference.
Well, if Steve still has Lightning Bolts in his deck, then Bolt
Right.
is lethal.
If Steve still has Lightning Bolt, then that changes the equation.
All right, so Raging Ravine is just going to attack for 6, knock Kyle down to 2. His hand was 2 lands. Steve is going to use the secret 4th ability on Liliana the Veil, which is do nothing. Because he has a Dark Confidant in his hand that he doesn't want to lose, and he knows that Kyle only has 2 lands. Kyle now is going to fall down to 1. Go find a basic island.
Yeah, can't get a shock land here. Well, I guess you could, but it'd have to be tapped.
Colonnade is going to activate. Oh, we found a path to exile. So the sequence we talked about could have happened last turn, but there's Lightning Helix instead.
So if Kyle is going to claw his way back into the game, this is how he does it. And one card that, you know, I frequently enjoy having in my Jund sideboard is Fulminator Mage, and this is a situation where it can do a lot of good work. So these Celestial Colonnades are really one of the best threats out of these blue-white based control decks.
Colonnade is going to take care of that Liliana, which, to be fair, did a lot of work this game. Steve has picked up a land, but it enters the battlefield tapped, so he's not going to be able to Raging Ravine and attack and play Dark Confidant. So he has to decide what he wants to do here.
And so I think if I were Steve, I would activate the smaller Raging Ravine as basically the sacrificial lamb, just assuming that Kyle has a path to exile.
Well, if he has Bolt or Helix, then he's not dead, whereas the other Raging Ravine kills through both Bolt and Helix.
But Kyle's in top deck mode, and if like Steve wants to bait out a removal spell so his Dark Confidant can survive, which is pretty, like, having that live is going to be pretty close to also winning the game.
Well, path to exile from Kyle is going to take care of that Raging Ravine.
Kyle might want to get on the beatdown plans. I don't know what options he has for using his mana.
Oh, did he pick up just running paths here to live?
Jeez.
Colonnade is going to attack Steve, knock him down to 16, pass the turn back. Steve Rubin just found a lightning bolt.
Oh my God! He still has him in the deck, I guess.
All right, going to attack
wow.
trigger. Running paths, not going to be good enough.
Boom!
I drew a lightning bolt.
What a top deck. Oh,
From
that
both
was
players.
so sick. Yeah. Wow, nice.
I mean, you can't be mad. Kyle just kind of shrugs. All right, man. I drew running paths. You drew the bolt to kill me. All's fair, and Jund and Jeskai flash.
Oh man, see, that's one of the things that I love about playing Jund is you put both players into top deck mode, and so what wins the game is always some sort of crazy sick top deck. Oh, that was great.
Man. All right, so let's take a look at the player sideboards here. Do we think anything is going to change on Steve's side?
I don't think anything is going to play from either side, but one thing that I hadn't mentioned is Rakdos Charm. Sometimes you can bring it in as a counter to Snapcaster Mage. I don't really like it, but I figure it's worth mentioning.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
It also can hit an artifact, so you can kill the golem.
Yep, it's true.
Which is pretty nice.
Yep. Or if your opponent's at 1 and they cast Snapcaster Mage, you can cast it so that they take a damage from the creatures they control.
Just kill them with their own creatures. I'm a big fan of that. So another format where you can do some real sweet things, including Rakdos Charm, is in the Commander format. And,
nice.
And I don't know if you're aware, but 5 new Commander decks just came out last week.
Oh, very cool.
Commander 2016 with some pretty sweet cards that you can play in either Legacy or in your Commander decks. And you can get them today on StarCityGames.com. Go to StarCityGames.com/Commander2016. There's even a big bundle where you can get all of the Commander decks, and you can get the Commander versus playmats. So you can see there, those are the same playmats that they use on the Commander versus video. So, you know, if you want to use a playmat that your hero Stephen Green has used, you can check those out.
And if you're a Legacy player, definitely keep your eye on the Commander series. There's some pretty cool cards that come out for Commander that are Legacy playable that a lot of people just kind of miss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, particularly I think that Atraxa, I think is how you pronounce it.
Which one's that?
So it's 4 mana, not red.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to say it.
Yeah.
And it's a 4/4 flying lifelink vigilance death touch.
Oh yeah.
For 4 mana.
Doesn't die to lightning bolt. Doesn't die to abrupt decay, and it's pretty good against Delver.
Yes. in Commander decks, you can also find this card.
Yeah.
Because my producers love me. They want to remind me of what happened last weekend with From the Ashes.
Yeah.
Destroys all non-basic. That's particularly good against Eldrazi decks in Legacy.
And Sanctum Prelate is from this new set of Commander decks, right?
It's from Conspiracy.
Conspiracy. Okay, got it.
Basically the same thing. Only,
Yeah.
only legal in Legacy.
Yeah.
As far as constructive, competitive formats go. All right, so it looks like Steve is going to be the one mulliganing this time. He's going to keep his 6, scry to the bottom. Kyle's going to start off with a basic island and a Serum Vision.
A little unfortunate there's no turn 1 Ancestral Visions. He can still potentially scry it to the top to keep it safe from a discard spell. But
the scry is going to go top bottom.
Although to balance things out, Steve hasn't really had the turn 1 discard in any of these games either, so.
All right, turn 2 Serum Vision for Kyle's going to draw a card. It's going to scry 2 cards to the top. He's going to play a basic mountain and pass.
And I feel like this basic mountain is a sign to Steve that whatever he plays has a chance of getting bolted. So if I had the option between Dark Confidant and Tarmogoyf, I would definitely lead with Tarmogoyf in this situation.
Yes. Well, Tarmogoyf would be a 2/3.
Yep. And with Lightning Bolt, it would be a 3/4.
Yes, so Lightning Bolt can't kill a Tarmogoyf here.
Right. And that's exactly why I would lead with it.
Man, it's almost like you've played this Jund deck before against cards that have Lightning Bolt in it. All right, so
there is the Goyf.
Black Leaf Cliffs for Steve. Tarmogoyf is going to come down as a 2/3. And so for those of you who are a little newer to the format and unclear about how this actually works, so the way Tarmogoyf and Lightning Bolt works is creatures that will die from damage happen as state-based effects. So if Tarmogoyf is a 2/3 and there's no instant in the graveyard, you can Lightning Bolt it. It has 3 damage on it. Lightning Bolt goes to the graveyard as part of the resolution of the spell, which then makes Tarmogoyf a 3/4. And then when the damage were to kill the Tarmogoyf, it's now a 3/4 and will no longer die.
Yeah, a good way to think about it is the Lightning Bolt hits the graveyard before the game checks to see if Tarmogoyf is dead or not.
So Kyle is just going to play a Blade Splicer. It's going to bring along a 3/3 Golem.
Ooh, and this is a bit of a cheeky attack.
Yeah, I got a 2/3. We're going to attack. You block, I got instance.
Yeah.
All right, Kyle is just going to take it. It's going to fall down to 16. Steve is going to play a Scavenging Ooze and pass the turn back. Maybe we'll see a Restoration Angel here trying to blink that Blade Splicer.
Yeah.
It is vulnerable to a Lightning Bolt.
You know, these Jeskai Flash decks, there's a lot of different varieties, and believe it or not, Restoration Angel is not necessarily the particularly popular card in these decks. You'll see it, but you won't see it all the time. Steve hasn't seen. Oh wait, no, he did see a Restoration Angel off the Thoughtseize in Game 2. So. But Restoration Angel is certainly a good reason for using your removal on your turn, even if it is an instant speed removal.
All right, so Kyle has a Celestial Colonnade for the turn, and then he's just going to Lightning Bolt that Scavenging Ooze. That's going to bring that Goyf up to a 4/5. Send in with his team. The lightning Bolt from Steve is going to take care of the Golem, and because it's a token, it doesn't actually get to sit into the graveyard.
Right.
But Goyf is a 4/5. It's such a big difference from a 2/3. That clock changes dramatically.
And one reason that Steve might have chose to Lightning Bolt on Kyle's turn is he was hoping to bait out a potential negate, because he does have Chandra in his hand, and with a land drop, he'd be able to play it.
Well, a Thoughtseize is going to target Kyle, and there's going to be 2 Restoration Angel and 2 Snapcaster Mage in his hand.
Yeah, and this is kind of a nightmare. Looks like he tapped the wrong mana.
Yeah, he does have to tap the right mana.
So this is, you know, they'll resolve this, you know, pretty soon, but just to talk about Kyle's hand real quick, that's 4 creatures that can all apply pressure as well as generate value. So a pretty knockout hand from Kyle Boggemes here.
And that just seems to be the name of the game from this Jeskai Flash deck.
For sure.
And, you know, even though the matchup is, I think, fairly even, it's just like one of the ways that this Jeskai Flash deck can pull ahead is, you know, Jund is relying on a lot of efficient one-for-one removal with a few ways to pull ahead. But all of the cards that Steve is going to be trading one-for-one with are all generating value when they enter the battlefield, which slowly allows him to generate card advantage over the course of the game.
Yeah, the Jeskai Flash deck has more guaranteed sources of card advantage, whereas Jund has more permanents that can sort of run away with the game if they can survive for a turn or two.
All right, well, Steve is going to take a Restoration Angel with his Thoughtseize and fall down to 14. He's going to attack with his Tarmogoyf and knock Kyle down to 12 and play another copy of Scavenging Ooze.
And what I like about this is if the, like this kind of shuts off the Snapcaster Mages in Kyle Boggemes' hand, and it also can provide a blocker so that Steve Rubin can potentially play offense and defense. That said, Steve has a lot to slog through, and I know when I play, sometimes I give a lot of consideration if I have a removal spell to bolting the Blade Splicer instead of the Golem token, simply because of the Restoration Angel issue.
It's nice to note that the -3 on Chandra Torch of Defiance can actually kill Restoration Angel.
Yeah, that is sweet.
If it gets to a point where that's relevant.
Yep.
The old Flame Tongue Kavu mode. All right, so it looks like Kyle is going to pass the turn. Steve is going to fetch on Kyle's end step.
I'm a little surprised that Steve chose to crack his fetch land there. I'm curious if this is just trying to bait Kyle into tapping out so that Steve can land his Chandra, yeah.
All right, so Steve is going to fetch. Kyle's going to snap bolt the Scavenging Ooze with the fetch on the stack. So Steve falls down to 13. Kyle's still at 12. And Steve's going to draw for his turn. And looks like we've got Raging Ravine and Chandra.
And playing Chandra here, the plus actually would be kind of an interesting mode, and just trying to basically attack Kyle's life total as aggressively as possible. Minusing the Chandra to kill one of these creatures, you know, killing the Blade Splicer is kind of decent, but being able to attack with the Tarmogoyf this turn, plussing the Chandra, and then next turn doing it all again plus the Raging Ravine is a pretty aggressive line of play.
Yeah. The problem is that if he lets that Blade Splicer live, it's just going to be able to generate a 3/3 along with Restoration Angel. Ooh, and he's going to leave the Goyf back to be able to block for his Chandra.
Yeah.
A removal spell here for Kyle, something that can take care of that Tarmogoyf, would be pretty bad for Steve. Pat to exile, etc.
And notably, if Kyle is looking to play a Restoration Angel at the end of Steve's turn and Chandra pluses and hits a removal spell, it's going to be an option.
So you can play the card until the end of your turn, not the beginning of the next end step.
Right.
All right, Kyle is just going to play a Celestial Colonnade and pass. We are going to get some sweet Chandra Torch of Defiance action here on SCG Live.
Yeah, and this is a card that a lot of people are excited about. I think it is really good. Definitely is one of the cards you should consider in your Jund deck.
All right, well, Steve is going to plus. It's going to hit a Blackleaf Cliffs. And since you're only able to cast the cards, not play them, he will not play it, and 2 damage is going to be dealt to Kyle.
And I kind of like swinging with the Raging Ravine here, but I think probably the Dark Confidant is definitely a worthy play.
All right, well, Tarmogoyf is going to attack. Kyle will block with his Snapcaster Mage and then blink it with Restoration Angel. Steve does have a Dark Confidant and going to pass the turn back. Kyle can take care of that Chandra here.
But you can see how when Steve, oh wow, so this is pretty powerful. So
Oh,
it looks
he's
like
just
he might
gonna
actually ignore the Chandra and just try to put Steve on a one-turn clock.
Just 7 up top.
So Steve does get to, have potentially 3 cards to work with here, including that Chandra activation.
So that attack for 7 is going to knock Steve down to 6. He'll reveal a land with his Dark Confidant and then pick up a card for his turn. Looks like it's Liliana, the Last Hope.
Wow, which just barely can buy him a turn, assuming that his Dark Confidant doesn't deal him any damage and he doesn't take any more damage. And he doesn't have a whole lot of mana to work with.
Oh no! So this is actually real interesting. If his if the land in his hand comes into play untapped, he actually can kill Kyle this turn. Because he would be able to plus for mana, Liliana, use Liliana to kill the
you're right.
the Snapcaster Mage and activate the Raging Ravine and attack for exactly 10. But unfortunately, it is Blackleaf Cliffs, which is real rough. But the Liliana plus will be able to shrink the Restoration Angel enough so that he can live through the following turn. But he will be at 1 with the Dark Confidant on the battlefield.
And so Steve, I believe that Tarmogoyf is just a 4/5. And so I think if I were Kyle, I would just take the damage here because it would only put him down to 4. And having the Snapcaster Mage as an extra attacker seems pretty worthwhile. Because now Path to Exile opens up a kill.
All right, so Liliana is going to plus on the Restoration Angel.
We saw some great top decks last game. Can we see another one here? Come on, give it to me.
All right, Colonnade is going to activate.
And Steve is probably looking to trade. Oh, he did draw the Path to Exile.
He did, so he's going to declare them as attackers.
Wow.
Tap his Colonnade for mana. Get rid of the Dark Confidant. Man, how?
Nice.
I wonder if he had it last turn so that, like, if Steve had hit the untapped land for the exactly lethal, if he would have been able to stop it with the Path to Exile. I wasn't able to quite see his hand, but that would... This is an insane match.
Yeah.
Played by 2 absolute masters.
Yeah, that was a real good one. And we could